A rather iconic model that anyone that played the GBA game or Medarot 2 may come to recognize particularly well. It is FFY00 Bottom Flash, with a kit of triple anti-C, C legs, and the leg ability of Trigger Happy, which buffs all leg stats minus armor and heavy limit when a shooting attack equipped scores a critical hit. Now, as a model available in the permanent banner as a 2-star model, Bottom Flash is a model that you can get anti-C parts from relatively readily, even just fresh starting the game within your first couple days. And even though anti-C might be a relatively niche skill to use, this Firefly type still does come packing some relatively solid heat if all conditions applied are coming into her favor. Anti-C on all 3 parts is a conventional shooting-based skill that is rather niche, but can be incredibly catastrophic if done correctly. If correctly and attacking an opponent with C-based legs, you will deal an additional punish multiplier of ×5 whatever your base intended damage was to be. In all other situations, though, it will be dealing relatively minimal if nominal damage at best in all other situations or leg types. So unless you're fighting a C-based leg, this model is certainly not one you want to bring to the forefront of the field, be that as a pure set or as mixed parts. But the leg ability of Trigger Happy does actually kind of tie her back just a little bit, again, if that situation does come back around. C legs means that Bottom Flash will have moderately decent coverage across all terrains, arguably the, I'd say, 3rd best leg type behind multi-ped and biped respectively when it comes to terrain mastery. One thing that does set C legs apart is that they share mastery on aquatic-based terrains, which no one else even comes close to using. So even if they have a lower base mobility, they are certainly going to be making up for it with that S rank on a terrain that everyone's probably going to be on B rank or lower on at best. And that's assuming no additional situation or leg ability or support skills that negate that or change it around. Now, as expected of a 2-star model, Bottom Flash most certainly isn't the most powerful or the most healthy when it comes to armor pool or base power either, with all of her parts packing between low 400s or mid 500s in base power, and her HP packing about 2900 for the head, 2550 per arm, and 3550 for the legs. Just a little bit tanky on those legs, but the arms are kind of squishy, but that is also to be expected to a point when it comes to female-based models too. Leg stats are unfortunately kind of all over the place too, with the exception of evade at over 1700, but being a C leg, having a high base evade is kind of to be expected. A mobility of 652 isn't bad, but it could also be worse. But again, factoring if you are fighting on a C-based terrain, this could very possibly make itself back and make itself pretty much a non-existent issue when everyone else is fighting a -10 or even a -20 debuff on all their leg stats. A melee resist of 669 and a shoot resist of 826, neither of which really are all that great though. So while it does mean she will be having a high base evade, she is going to be very largely relying on that said evade stat to keep her damage low by either dodging or grazing a lot of incoming attacks. But if one hits, it's going to be pretty painful no matter which way you look at it. As a pure set score, with all this said, I still do have to rate Bottom Flash a pretty flat 4 out of 10 unfortunately. Given that she has anti-C on all 3 parts means she is incredibly niche to use pretty much right from start, and if there are any enemies on the opposing side that do not have C legs, that effectively makes Bottom Flash completely and entirely useless unfortunately. And while Trigger Happy is a nice ability to make use of, you really can't capitalize on it too much if you're not scoring crits, which honestly is also something tricky to use. In addition, because she is also packing a C leg herself, she is weak to what she deals out the most, which are also anti-C parts. That means she can certainly dish it out, but she certainly can't take it if it were to be somehow reversed or if anti-C is used on her. As mixed parts though, I have to rate her just a little bit higher at about a 5 out of 10. Again, even though the leg resist stats are pretty bad if I'm completely honest, and the mobility is kind of nominal, the Trigger Happy leg ability is still actually pretty solid to capitalize on, especially for female models. So if you were to pair that off with a really good shooting part and something that can guarantee you a lot of critical hits, you could probably boost those stats up pretty quick and make her even more of an imposing threat. And while Anti-Sea is certainly something you don't want to main as your primary source of damage, it certainly also wouldn't hurt either to have 1 or 2 parts raised, even if just for the sake of having them on hand and ready to go, just in the off chance you might fight someone with Aquatic Sea legs.